What's up? This is Ryan, and you are watching another Reflections video. So, today, what I thought I would talk about is happiness. Now, depending on when you catch me, uh, this might be something that you wouldn't normally associate with me, um, because I can be quite a serious person, and in some of my videos, I probably give off uh, fairly robotic vibes, a fairly robotic impression. Um, and I don't deny that in the least. And certainly last year, I went through some work conditions which led to me being, on the whole, less happy. But since I started teaching myself how to program and just kind of following somewhat of a, for lack of a better term, self-development journey, I'm not a big fan of that word because it has a lot of Tony Robbins-like connotations, but not to diss Tony Robbins, but his stuff isn't really for me. Anyways, I wanted to talk about happiness and not looking for it in the wrong places. And this is something that just about everyone around me pretty much seemed to get wrong. And it's something I regularly still get wrong. And I think you'll start to understand what I'm talking about as this rambling progresses. But let me give you an idea of what I thought about happiness when I was about 16 or 17 years old. So around 16 or 17, I'm in high school, doing fine. And when I was 16 and 17, I finally realized that studying is a thing I have to do. And so my grades started to get way better because I was actually studying a bit. I was in the weight room and stuff like that. So it was kind of the first time that I guess in a way you could say I was almost becoming a man. uh, but here's the funny thing. So I was very unhappy at the time, and I won't go into the finer details of why, but it's just being a teenager and stuff like that. We all go through unhappiness. But I was quite unhappy, and just very negatively minded all the time because the people that I was around were, at home in particular, were generally quite negative minded. So I don't know exactly when this happened, but I started to actually ask the question around that age. Okay, well, what what does happiness mean? Like, how can I make myself happier? And this was like one of the worst things I've ever done in my life, and it was a very powerful teaching. Is when I reflect on it, is that so I've always been a very sort of analytical, rational type person. I try to solve every problem in my life by looking at it, analyzing it, and working out, okay, what is the most accurate solution? Like very empirical, rational, analytical kind of stuff. That at least that's the self view I have, and so I applied that process to happiness at that age, and what I came up with was really bad. Um, I so I looked at the evidence in front of me. So I looked at people who seemed to be happy all of the time, or most of the time. Um, and then I looked at, well, yeah, I looked at people who were happy all of the time. And by happy I mean like happy and smiling and all that kind of stuff. And just unfortunately based on the fact, just a lot of misunderstanding on my part and messed up beliefs and many things like that. I actually thought that you had to be stupid to be happy all the time. That was actually something I used to believe when I was. Luckily, I shake that belief off. I think by the end of high school, I'd kind of shaken that belief off, but that was a big part of my senior year in high school. Was I actually thought people who are like happy, like smiling and all that, had to be dumb because they don't see how bad the world is. So, anyways, if you're someone, and like I had, definitely there was like a sneering intellectualist ego behind that, like, oh well, if I can't be happy, at least I can be smarter than you. That kind of attitude, and I know some people listening to this are going to relate to that. And my advice is, you need to kill that attitude with fire, because it makes you a less attractive person, and it's not correct to begin with. But that was that was a big thing I had going on. Is I had a lot of insecurity, and so my way of dealing with that insecurity was to try and take other people down. And the only thing I was kind of like uh, proud about was my intellect. Oh yes, I'm a smart person. So, anyways, obviously I had some pretty messed up perspectives on what happiness was as a teenager, and like I say, there's just a lot of dysfunction in my home growing up. So I had no one to really teach me um, any reasonable things about it, and yeah. So around the age of 19, which is kind of when I started to actually, like I say, that was around when I started to think about things like self-development, improving myself, because the one thing I knew is I knew I had just a mountain of problems to deal with, and but I didn't really know how to go about dealing with them. So I started to explore this topic of, oh, there's my loud ass fridge kicking on. I love that noise. Um, if I started to explore this question, so what does happiness actually mean? So most of us, when at least I can say in Western culture, and I think this is pretty common in most cultures, is we tend to think that happiness is just being able to most immediately and powerfully satisfy every impulse that comes into our heads. The the way I like to think of it is, as soon as I moved out when I was 17, as soon as I could, right after high school, like literally that summer, I moved out into a different city and out of home. And the thing that was so awesome about that is that I basically I got a job really quickly, because I've had jobs since I was a little kid, and so that wasn't a big deal. And I just straight away, um, got a nice gaming computer. Was eating Tim Hortons, which is like fast food kind of. It's on the nicer end of fast food certainly, and it's Canadian, so I love it. But just eating crappy food, and whenever I want, eating whatever popped into my head. I want to go get some burgers, eat 2 Whoppers and a pizza, just go eat that. Um, Being able to game pretty much whenever I want. Being able to go exercise whenever I want. Just like gratification of wants. I want. That's kind of what I thought happiness was. being able to satisfy your wants, because those wants are so important. It's so important that I go and eat two Whoppers and an extra large bacon cheddar pizza from Domino's, which is one of the meals I actually ate around that period. And I almost died because I don't metabolize carbohydrates very well. Anyways, so that was the picture around that age, is that it's just gratifying sense pleasures. When I don't get what I want, I'm in a bad mood. When I get what I want, then at least the nagging want goes away. But I started to notice that a lot of the things that I thought I wanted under that approach of just happiness is being able to satisfy what you want, I started to notice that that was actually killing me, making me, in fact, during that period around 19, I was the most depressed I've ever been, just in relative to how good my life was, at least. I had no one yelling at me, abusing me, threatening me, anything like that going on. I didn't have to worry about money at that period. I, other than my job, I had pretty much all the spare time I wanted, and I was miserable. And this is something I've talked about in these reflections videos before. And so anyways, I started to realize after a while that all these things that I thought I wanted, sugar, video games, all that stuff, and I'm not saying you can't, I'm not saying I never do those things, I never indulge in these things, but what I am saying here is in that period of my life, those were what I actually thought happiness came from. You go to work, you're miserable or at least bored all day at work, and then you get home, and then it's substances, stimulus addiction, food addiction, basically was my cycle. So I'm not a religious person at all. I'm a very, I would say, philosophical person, and there's two different. I've seen an alternative to this sense gratification approach of being happy pop up in two different philosophical traditions. One of them technically being a religion, but it's quite a different religion than most religions. As Sam Harris has mentioned, the word religion is a little bit like sports. So you have sports like rugby, or MMA, and then you have sports like badminton, or what's another example? Something like that. We group them all into the same umbrella, but there's big differences between a lot of them. But they all tend to tackle this problem in their own way. Anyways, I'm still not a very religious person, but I try to learn from all kinds of. I learn from mythological stories. I learn from philosophy. I try to learn from everything, and I'm not like a. If you are a religious person, I'm not one of those militant atheists that's gonna come and argue with you. But there's two philosophical traditions, I'll call them, which totally reshaped my brain on happiness. And those two were Buddhism and Stoicism. Now, when I say Stoicism, I'm talking, in my case, specifically about my interpretation and understanding of the works of Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor. And I tried to read Epictetus, who is another Stoic philosopher, and I didn't make it very far with his stuff, but I do think I am quite fond of Marcus Aurelius. So, what does this have to do with happiness? So, Marcus Aurelius, there's this passage, and again, this is translated, but this or line rather, not so much a passage, was no longer be dissatisfied with thy present lot, nor shrink from the future. So I know some of my viewers are ESL, so I'll kind of simplify that, because that's like old English. No longer be dissatisfied with thy present lot. What are you saying there? So if I were to put it into like working class simple English, basically what that statement means is, okay, do plan for the future, do work hard, but while you're working hard, don't be pissed off about where you are at now. So we have this balance of effort and patience. So effort, yes, do good things, do work hard, try to improve your situation, do that. That's a good thing. But at the same time, if you are in a situation where you don't have a lot, you have big goals, but you're still down here, if you really worry about that, that can really piss you off. It can make you upset. It can give you a lot of problems. It can give you depression. I want to be up here. I want to be financially independent. I want to, be able to travel. All these things, these goals we set. But you're down here. You're, if I were to speak for myself back at that point, you're working a job you hate, waking up extra early in the morning to study programming, which at that time I didn't even really like programming. And, yeah, and because I was, and this is a natural thing to go through, but because I thought what I wanted was all these things to make me happy. If I just get this, I'll be happy. I was applying that same basically want, desire, gratification process that made me super depressed with things like my video game addiction, which I have conquered thankfully, and other addictions I had, addiction to unhealthy food. That one died several years ago. But that just get the thing I want and then I'll feel happy sort of negative process. I was applying that to my goals. So what Marcus Aurelius is saying, is when you're in the shit, when you're in a situation that is not good, and we all go through them, and you have to work, maybe you have to work a crappy job and then study on the side, or you have to work several jobs, or you have to study, 10 hours a day and you don't have any kind of life going on. When you're in those positions, you have to basically watch yourself, stop yourself from being negative. And you have to tell yourself when those kind of negative thoughts, oh, I'm not successful, I'm not where I want to be, life sucks. When those thoughts come in, you have to say to yourself, this has to be good enough. This has to be good enough for now. It just has to be. Why does it have to be good enough? Because it is the way it is. This is reality. This is the situation you're in, here and now. And you can either be upset about it, or you can be patient about it. Notice I didn't say happy. I said either upset or patient. Sometimes you can be happy about what's going on, even if it's an adverse situation. But I'm not telling you to be happy when really bad things are happening around you. But you can be patient. You can let go of so to get into the Buddhist side of the philosophy, as an analogy, the other tradition I wanted to briefly mention, an analogy which is attributed to Siddhartha Gautama, is that when something bad happens in life, you get hit with two arrows, like a bow arrow. So one of the arrows is unavoidable. So to give you a personal example, in 2016, I probably tore collectively over the span of several months, about 3 different muscles in my back, like tore, ripped. 2 of them were large, not large, reasonably large, medium-sized muscles. One of them was like an intercostal muscle. And so pretty much from summer 2016 till summer 2017, I was basically in constant pain, physical pain, constantly, every day. Because I had to work during that period. I didn't get given social assistance. I was denied it twice for reasons I don't really understand. And so I had to work during my injuries in a fairly physical job. So the first arrow is the physical pain you feel when you hurt yourself, or it can be emotional pain, the initial trauma. Something bad happens. The second arrow is, as Marcus would put it, your opinion about the thing. And both of these philosophical traditions, what they basically say is, you don't have control over the shit that life throws at you, but you do have control over how you deal with it, how you interpret it, and how you process it. And so basically, to bring this full circle, around the age of 22, I don't remember where I initially heard this or if I actually made this up. I don't think I made it up, but I think I rephrased it from some other source. And so to bring this back around to happiness, happiness to me at this point, what it means in my life is basically not wanting for the world to be different than it is. Not wanting for reality to be different than it is. Now, that can be misinterpreted, because it can be interpreted in a, like, if I just don't want anything ever and I don't do anything, then I'll be happy, then, okay, I guess I should just meditate for the rest of my life. So that's not what I'm saying, because the problem is there's different kinds of want. But when I say not wanting for the world to be different than it is, it goes back to being okay with how things are now, and just accepting that there's only a small degree to which you can change how things are. It's only a really small degree. You should pay attention to that. So that is the side of making effort to improve yourself, help your friends, help your family, just be a good person, do good things, so that you can affect a small amount of change there, and that will lead to like the actual happiness, the smiley part. But the lasting contentment is something which appears to me to be more important to chase after in the long term. Because, to wrap this up, last year was one of the most difficult years I've ever had to deal with. It was the most difficult year in terms of work output. And I had a whole bunch of things go wrong. I literally had like, what's here? Yeah, like 4 different business ventures either fizzled out or just went totally south. And I just horrible work situations. Like it was a pretty bad year in that regard. But I actually got through it fine. Like fine in the sense of just I was pretty content about it even throughout all the horrible things that were going on. And the reason why is that during even the worst periods, a lot of this comes from meditation. I'm not saying this is just, you just reframe this in your brain and suddenly you're happy all the time. It doesn't work like that, because brains are physical structures. You have to slowly rewire them over time. and there's only so much you can affect with your thoughts. But yeah, not only did I not completely fall apart, which I came close to, but I actually came out of this year feeling really proud of myself. Not happy with how bad things went, but proud of myself that I basically made it through some really difficult situations with patience. I didn't let those situations get to me to some immense degree. So, anyways, I think I'm rambling long enough on this particular topic. So the point of this talk was just for people listening. If you're like I used to be, and you're someone who is quite negative all the time, I'm still a very cynical person by nature. I am wired to be very cynical and skeptical. But even when things are bad now, I'm generally whereas before, if I were to describe it, my happiness, sadness kind of thing, it's like I was a sailboat on top of the ocean. And when the ocean was really rough and everything was horrible, of course, I was getting blown all over the place. Whereas if you can manage to decouple, as we say in programming, the problems with your opinion about the problems, oh, this is so horrible, I wish this, why can't things be different, why, if I just get this, then I'll feel better for the rest of my entire life, that kind of stuff. If you let go of that, life's easier in a good way. You don't create as many problems for yourself. You better deal with problems when they arise because you're not as stressed out. And you eventually start to realize that all of those things that you think you want in order to be happy, some of them actually, just to be honest, they're never going to give you that. And society really chases after these things, but what I would suggest to people is work on yourself, try to do good things, and help other people, because that will give you self-esteem. And most of all, be patient. It takes a long time. Long fucking time. But if you keep working on yourself, then I think you'll start to see results eventually. So thank you for listening, and hopefully that rambling was useful.